McStay Family, the internet's most enduring mystery, finally gets solved. The McStay family vanishing. Not even the babies were spared. McStay family vanishing when the internet gets it all wrong. For 3 years, the McStay family disappearance had all the ingredients to become one of those infamous internet mysteries alongside Maura Murray, Asha Degree, and the Malaysian flight MH370. A sweet, picturesque, seemingly joyful family of 4 just disappears into thin air, and the internet had their minds set on the wrong suspects from the very start. But 12 years later, a bombshell discovery left us all with egg on our faces. Let's dive into one of the only cold cases of this level of internet notoriety that ever managed to get solved. Here's the case of the McStay family disappearance. Let's go back to 2010 in Fallbrook, California, where the McStays lived. Joseph McStay 40 was the successful business owner of Earth-Inspired Products, a company that designed and installed decorative water features. His wife, Summer, age 43, was a licensed real estate agent. The business was doing well enough that Summer could stay home with the couple's 2 sons, 4-year-old Gianni and 3-year-old Joseph Jr. The family weren't millionaires by any means, but they were doing well enough that they could live in a pretty affluent area of California in a brand new house. For the most part, Joseph did the installations, while his wife kept the books in order. But every now and then, he'd need to hire day laborers or his close friend Chase Merritt for the more labor-intensive outdoor installations. Here's the thing about Merritt, though. He was a felon, with prior convictions for burglary and receiving stolen property a decade before he started working part-time for Joseph. But hey, people change, and Joseph certainly trusted Merritt enough to run things when he couldn't. There are 2 more important points about the family that need to be mentioned because it became a major focus of the investigation later. Firstly, Summer was a jealous woman and very possessive of her husband. There were no instances of domestic violence, but her jealousy and rather hot temper was well known, with most chalking it off to her spicy Italian roots. And lastly, Joseph was ill. So ill, in fact, that his debilitating fatigue left him bedridden for days on end. His family knew that he wasn't well. His business associates, namely Merritt, were also aware that he was sick, but no one knew exactly what condition he was suffering from. He'd gone to numerous doctors about this, but no one could figure out what was wrong with him. Luckily, Merritt was there to pick up the slack when it was needed. On February 4th, just 3 months after moving into the new home, Joseph spoke to his father on the phone while his wife and children were getting ready for what they planned to be a lazy Sunday. He briefly mentioned that he had a meeting to go to, but didn't elaborate where or with whom. Merritt would later tell the police that the meeting took place at a nearby Chick-fil-A and that the purpose of the meeting was for Joseph to hand over some blank checks to Merritt so that he could make purchases for business expenses. But police could never find any surveillance or receipts to prove that they were there at all. After this supposed meeting, at around noon, Joseph started making some strange phone calls. First, he called Union Bank, his personal bank, then he called Merritt. He proceeds to make multiple calls between Merritt and the bank until the bank closed. After 5, Joseph's phone stopped receiving any activity and was seemingly turned off. And for the next 6 days, that's how it remained. Since the kids were too young to be in school and Merritt was conducting business for Joseph as usual, no one noticed that an entire family had somehow vanished off the face of the planet. It wasn't until the 10th of February that someone finally realized that something wasn't right. Joseph's father received a phone call from another business associate who'd been trying to locate Joseph. Mr. McStay then spent 3 whole days trying to call Joseph on his cell phone. Joseph's parents and siblings just assumed that the family went away for a short getaway. But by day 3, none of them could think of an excuse as to why Joseph wouldn't have let any of his clients know that he was out of town. So they finally did something about it. On the 13th, Michael, Joseph's brother, calls up Merritt and the 2 of them go over to the locked house. They found the dogs in the backyard, nearly hysterical with joy to see humans. Michael was immediately concerned, sure that his sister-in-law would never leave her beloved dogs to starve for 2 weeks. The pair gained entry through an open window on the ground floor and walked into a very eerie scene. On the couch were 2 bowls of popcorn. On the stairs was a rotting, partially eaten apple, and on the kitchen counter stood a carton of eggs, apparently left as someone was in the middle of preparing a meal with them. It was hard to tell if anything was missing because most of their possessions were still packed up in boxes, and there was a major remodel going on. Despite all of the concerning things they saw, Joseph's family waited another 2 days before reporting them missing. Sadly, the infuriating actions of the people around this family just get worse. After this point, everything goes downhill. Susan McStay, Joseph's elderly mother, went to the home and started cleaning it. During this destruction of potential evidence, Michael, the brother, removes Joseph's computer from the home. The police did put a stop to it the moment they became aware of it, but by then, the damage was already done. We can only assume that Susan McStay acted irrationally due to her distress, and that Michael might have taken the computer with the intention of running the business for his brother while the search went on. All operating with good intentions, even if those good intentions were fueled by absolute idiocy. Luckily, the police did take a few photographs of the home during their initial search, showing that one of the pull-out couches had its cover missing. But given all the chaos of a remodel going on, they didn't immediately flag that missing cover as a point of concern. The police were actually doing quite a bit of digging during the time that the McStay relatives were stomping through a potential crime scene. Besides looking into the family, various associates and clients, they ran across Merritt's criminal record, and they were utilizing most of their resources to pull Joseph, Summer, and Merritt's cell phone records. And what they found was very telling indeed. First, they found surveillance dating back to the day that the McStays disappeared. At 7:47 in the evening, a neighbor's camera caught footage of a car pulling out of the McStay driveway. Given the darkness and the fact that the camera only caught a sliver of the car, it was hard to identify the vehicle, but it looked like a workman's truck, similar to what Merritt was driving at the time. From what they could tell from the grainy footage, the truck exited the driveway from a backed-up position. The only reason someone would go to that kind of trouble is if they wanted the back end to be closest to the garage door to load something onto it. On the 5th of February, one day after the McStays were last known to be alive, Merritt drove to a location in the high desert of California, near Victorville. This area is approximately 100 miles away from his or the McStays' homes, and he had no good reason to be there. On this route, he passed by a storage unit that he and Joseph owned together and returned in time to write out 6 of those blank checks that he claimed Joseph gave to him, totaling up to $15,210. They were able to find a further $18,000 worth of checks that he'd forged in the business's name. To make matters worse for Merritt, he didn't need the money to help his sick granny. No, he had a serious gambling addiction. Every time he cashed a check, he'd go on a gambling spree until his money ran out, and then he'd go back and do it all over again. Then police found that on the 8th of February, 4 days after they were last spoken to, the family's personal Isuzu trooper was caught on CCTV 80 miles away at a guitar center, just a few minutes away from the Mexico border. The trooper was later located, abandoned in the parking lot. Unfortunately, the footage didn't show anyone in the car, so there's no way to tell who was driving it. They did swing by the border and got their hands on a video showing a family of 4 that vaguely resembled the McStays walking across the border. Like all the other video evidence they had, this one was taken at night and no one could be definitively identified. Then, everything screeched to a halt. There was no physical evidence inside the home, no obvious sign of a struggle, and as suspicious as Merritt was, they could only charge him for the fraudulent checks. Merritt wasn't talking, no matter how much pressure they put on him. So for the next 12 years, the case hung in the air and the true crime community online were having a field day. Police released the footage of the family walking across the border, the location of their car, and the fact that the family had cleaned the house and walked off with the computer. Joseph's mystery illness also leaked, not to mention Summer's jealousy. You can probably see where the internet took this narrative, especially given that they weren't aware of Merritt's odd movements and cell phone pings. Everyone had this chalked off to one of 2 theories. Either the family just picked up and left for Mexico to start a new life, or Summer had been poisoning her husband all this time, and when he finally died, she, her lover, and her sons fled across the border. Many believe that Michael McStay wanted Joseph's business and that he killed them for it. Or maybe they were protecting the family by hiding them somewhere because Joseph got into hot water with a couple of mob bosses. Every new theory was crazier than the next, but until the McStays, or at least their remains, were found, police couldn't do much but wait for something to shake loose. Miraculously, this 12-year-old case got the breakthrough that so very few cold cases do. On November 11, 2013, a biker stopped beside the road to relieve himself when he stumbled across human remains. And you guessed it, those remains belonged to the 4 McStay family members, buried in 2 shallow graves in the high desert of California near Victorville. Does that location sound familiar to you? Well, it should. That's the location where Merritt's phone pinged when he went on that long 100-mile drive the day after the family disappeared. Autopsies revealed that the whole family were bludgeoned to death by a sledgehammer. Summer and Gianni were buried together, with the sledgehammer in question alongside them, while Joseph and Joseph Jr. were buried several yards away. Beside the blunt force trauma, Joseph had an electrical cord around his neck and he was wrapped up inside the pull-out couch's missing cover, proving that their deaths most likely happened inside the home that had now been twice cleaned by both the killer and Joseph's mother. Also in the graves were a child's backpack with the rest of the electrical cord inside, a pull-up diaper, a lone cell phone cover, a woman's bra, underwear, and black shorts wrapped in a towel and blue painter's tape. All of the items belonged to the McStays and would have been present in the home on the day of their disappearance. The tower that Merritt's phone pinged off of in the high desert area is only 2 miles away from the gravesite. Finally, police could release everything they knew and suspected because this was officially murder and there was only one suspect worth looking into. On the day of their disappearance, Joseph became aware that Merritt was stealing money, explaining the multitude of calls to the bank and to Merritt. When he confronted Merritt over the phone, Merritt, knowing that he was looking at a hell of a long time behind bars for his 3rd major offense, went over to the house hoping to talk himself out of it. While Summer was preparing a late lunch and the kids were watching a movie, the argument escalated, resulting in Joseph's death. Merritt, not willing to leave any witnesses behind, killed Summer and the kids too. Given that a tool from the house was used, Merritt probably didn't plan this quadruple murder, but he did it anyway, taking 2 little boys' lives just because he didn't want the world to know that he was a thief. He then backed the car into the garage to load the bodies so that he could hide them in the storage unit, buying him some time to clean up the scene. 2 days later, when no one had yet realized that they were gone, he drove out to Victorville to bury the evidence and the bodies in the desert. To further obscure evidence, he left the car in a parking lot near the Mexico border, hoping that everyone would assume the family was on holiday and that they'd met a terrible fate over there. He just got lucky that another family just happened to cross the border that night, leading the police on a wild goose chase. If their bodies weren't found, the world would still be villainizing 2 innocent people. We learned 2 things from this tragic affair. First, that the cancel mob runs off half-baked theories that have the potential to utterly destroy innocent people's lives based on nothing more than a rumor. And secondly, even the smallest, most vulnerable members of our society aren't safe from one man's greed and addiction. Chase Merritt is on death row now, but him dying isn't going to bring back Gianni and Joseph Jr., just babies, dead because they were unfortunate enough to be in the radius of a desperate man whose sins had caught up to him.